Never get tired of that intro. Hey, hey, John, how you doing?
I'm doing great. It's been quite a week, huh?
I have a feeling that for the next several months, we're probably going to say that at the beginning of every show.
They shoot by and feel like about half a day, and then they also feel like they're about a month in terms of the actual content of the week. So lots to ponder.
Lots to ponder. I love the shirt. I think that there's probably going to be several references to the orange skies in San Francisco.
It's an homage.
But it actually brings warmth and happiness into this show. Welcome everybody to Intersections. We are looking forward to jamming with you today. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of get things going, and then we'll bring on our first guest. So Intersections is a weekly jam session where we have conversations that dive deep into the intersections among technology, innovation, culture, and ideas. Every week, we bring you diverse personalities and worldviews together in service of greater understanding and hashtag unlearning. I'd love to introduce my co-host and co-creator of Intersections, and also the genius behind the piano for our intro and outro today. In fact, I think we need to have a fresh jam every single episode because you have a new fan in me. So The Economist has called John a Mr. Creativity and a serial innovator. He's a thought leader. He's an entrepreneur. He's an advisor. He's played a prominent role in innovation and business creativity for over 30 years. He taught at Harvard Business School. He is also serving faculty, or are you still serving at MIT Media Lab in Stanford?
No, I'm retired. I'm also an expert in serial retirement.
Oh man! And this is why this is a weekly jam session. So he's also a Tony-nominated producer of film and stage, and wrote the best-selling Jamming: The Art and Discipline of Business Creativity. He also has a really phenomenal Forbes column, and make sure you follow him on Twitter, LinkedIn, and his other social accounts. We'll make sure to share those links with you during the show. In fact, John, before I officially welcome you, I did see today's article in Forbes. If you want to give us a quick overview of what you wrote so that we can send people over there.
Well, it has been a great experience to immerse in live stream because it's a new medium, much as television replaced or superseded movies eventually, and movies went a step further than theater. And so I reflected on our experience of getting this show started. I think last week I said that I felt like you and I were like movie guys in 1910, figuring out the basic grammar of the medium. And so the title of the piece is what the keys are to understanding the significance of live streaming and how it plays into the future of media, which you and I are living right now. We're living the dream.
Living the dream. I love it. Well, yeah. Welcome, John, to your show.
Well, to our show, and I couldn't be happier with this collaboration with Brian Solis, who is many-faceted. I think both of us have a number of different things going. He's a best-selling author. He's a thought leader in digital marketing. He's the global innovation evangelist for Salesforce. He's a raconteur par excellence, a world-class dad and sailor, and many other things besides. And, if I'm the piano player, he's the sax player, because this whole startup has really, in a sense, been new economy flavor in terms of improvising our way to a result, which is where we are today. So welcome, Brian Solis, to your show.
Yeah, thank you. I'm loving this. I'm loving the people that we are able to bring together, both on the show and then all around the world. Looks like we have, it's just incredible. In fact, share where you are joining in from, and we will make sure to feature you on screen. So let's just dive right in. Our first guest is someone who, as I was putting together his bio for the show, he's been a friend for many, many, many years, and it's just one of those moments where you realize, gosh, what an incredible person to know. He was named by Time as one of the top 5 marketing innovators. He's an author, an executive advisor, speaker, and former chief growth officer at Publicis Group. He is also the author of an incredible book, Restoring the Soul of Business, Staying Human in the Age of Data. It has been regarded as an operating manual for managing people, teams, and careers. And before we bring Rishad Tobaccowala on officially, I also want to send a shout out to Leslie Evers, who is our graphic recorder who helps us capture these fantastic conversations visually. And actually, I use them as notes. Hope you do too. Rishad, welcome to the show.
Like we were lost.
Well, we might have to try that again. This is the improvisation.
Special effect.
Rishad, welcome officially.
Absolutely. I have my bar at the back since we don't have a bar to go to.
Oh, that's convenient.
You know what? We're on our way.
Yeah.
Well, before we jump in, as I was putting this together, I didn't realize that you had moved on from Publicis Group. So kind of catch us up on what you're doing, and then we'll jump into the book.
Yeah, so I had sort of decided a few years ago that when I turned 60, which was in June of last year, I would stop working full-time at the group. And I mentioned that to them 2 years in advance. And so we agreed that I would then move to an advisory role, which I continue to remain. But I've basically focused in 3 areas. One is writing. My book is one of those. I write a blog, and 3 weeks ago, I launched a free newsletter, which I think you all had put the handle up for. The second is I do both speaking but teaching. What I've discovered is that 6 months into COVID-19, a lot of people feel that they're not growing anymore. HR and other groups are trying to find ways for people to grow. So I've started teaching a combination of courses on everything from how to upgrade your mental operating system, or as well as how to manage change so it sucks less, and how to lead with soul. And the last one is I have a advisory business. I obviously continue to advise Publicis, where I have a great relationship after having worked there for 37 years. But I also advise a lot of CEOs, startups, private equity. So writing / teaching / advising is what I do. And then I also help run a foundation in India to give back.
Wow. Well, let's dive in. I was reading a review of your book recently that wondered whether or not you had written it in the time of COVID-19, because it seemed to be so appropriate. But indeed you didn't. But it is exactly right on. In fact, I would say that it's probably more poignant than ever. So maybe share with us that connection, but also the inspiration behind the book.
Sure. So the book, the basic reason for the book is to help people think, see, and feel differently about how to grow themselves, their teams, and their business. So it's really about growth, but from a human perspective. And my basic belief is you cannot grow a company if you can't grow teams. And you can't grow teams if you can't grow people. And we had forgotten that, and we had turned too much into believing that a combination of M&A, change agents, and press announcements was going to take people into the future. We're also tilted too much towards what I call the spreadsheet and forgotten the story. And that the real successful companies, like let's say a Southwest, combines the spreadsheet and the story versus let's say a United, right? And what was surprising is that most companies also began to believe that data was everything. And I believe data is extremely important. It's like electricity. You can't really do without it. But very few companies differentiate themselves on their use of electricity. So yes, some companies obviously are data-driven companies where data is their competitive advantage. Many of the platforms are that, but most other people are not. So my whole thing is, look, let's start figuring out how to combine the spreadsheet and the story and come in from a human perspective. But I also wanted to write in a modern way. So while it is a book and it's available obviously in Audible and CD-ROM and up in the cloud on glows. I wrote a book where you can read any chapter in any order. So it's a Spotify playlist with the theme being the story of the spreadsheet. And that has made people really excited because, in effect, I get people to read the chapter they think they will find most interesting first because they have self-selected, they like it, and then they read other stuff and they think it's a good book. So it's a very interesting way of like getting people into a book. The chapters that have most resonated very quickly as to why people think it's a COVID-19 book is I have a chapter on how do you manage workforces that are spread out. I have a chapter on how do you lead with soul. How do you manage when you're under pressure and there is change? And the reason is I was writing for humans and I was writing for anybody who has to work with humans and technology, which is what we're basically doing. And that's the reason it has tended to resonate. And it's very practical. So there are no case studies, there are stories. And it's all about what you can do right now.
Well, that's one thing that I wanted to ask you about. I love the framework, and it reminds me of what Confucius said. He said, if you want to change society, you have to change your social unit. If you want to change your social unit, you have to change the family. If you want to change the family, you have to start with the individual. And so yes. This profoundly humanistic perspective, I think, is very welcome. And we're all stressed in one way or another. We're all looking for pathways of personal development. But how do we actually implement this in a real world where organizations are often run by people who have been rewarded for being spreadsheet culture people? Spreadsheet cultures are highly resistant to change because people get rewarded for according with those metrics. And this is like moving into the era of values and feeling and what traditional management types might call the soft stuff. So how does change happen?
The reason it happens is I use math to convince all the people who cherish math that combining the story and spreadsheet does three key things. It attracts and retains talent, number one. Number two, you have higher customer satisfaction, which I believe to a great extent is important. But number three, it increases market cap and stock value. And when they basically see that, I basically say anyone who fixates on data is soft-brained. They don't know what they're talking about. And anybody who basically says, I let data do the decision-making, I said, you're going to be replaced by an AI, get the hell out. Humans choose with their hearts. We use numbers to justify what we just do. If that wasn't true, you wouldn't have all this madness we have in our country and other places. So the reality of it is if you don't come from a human perspective, you miss everything. So that's really the way I look at it. And so I show them that story and I compare industries and I compare companies.
Yeah, I'm going to just ask you a quick question because I believe that two keys moving forward are the combination between mindset but also heart set. And I don't know that enough people allow themselves to plug into the heart set. And we can see that with the evolution of not just business, but pretty much a lot of things in society. We're highly irrational in a lot of things we do, but at the same time, we're incredibly logical in some of the rules that we follow or don't allow ourselves to unfollow. I would love to hear from you. What are some of the things that we need to think about from a leadership perspective to shift to that heart set, to empower empathy, and to reward more human engagement across the organization?
So there are three things that I would suggest to people. First is understand that there are 5 characteristics of leaders, and every day you should try to work towards getting better at those. And those 5 characteristics are capability, which is you better be good at what you are supposed to be doing, which is number one. The second is integrity. And integrity is 2 things. It's obviously trust and that you aren't lying, but as importantly that you're using data, you're looking at the real world, and you're being transparent about how your decision-making is happening. The third one, to your point, is empathy, which is understanding what other people's perspectives are, where they're coming from. The fourth one is vulnerability, which is to know that you sometimes don't have the answers, that you too don't know what's going on. And the fifth one is inspiration, which is the ability to, through personal example and storytelling, lead people beyond the valley of facts into the mountain, right? So those 5 things are that's the first one. The second one is to recognize the time that you are basically in. So I've just, sent in the private chat. a link to something that I wrote on how people should think about the world post-COVID-19, right? And while my book was written before, I decided to write something about post-COVID-19. And it's been used by boardrooms. I speak to a lot of boardrooms. And the words I use are the following. I basically say we're not in the quote unquote, there is going to be no new normal. We're moving into a new strange. That's number one. Number two is, and the reason for it is when you take people all over the world for 6 months and change what they do, they change their behaviors. So they come out in completely different ways. But as importantly, we have to learn how to, and that's the full story up there. It's called the Great Reinvention. We have to figure out how to address fragility, sculpt resilience, and practice resurrection, right? And once I start talking on those words, it's about, we have a fragile society, fragile businesses, fragile individuals, but we have to be resilient. So what do we do? So I show what can be done on those levels from business. And then how do you restore, which is resurrect? So that's very important. And in the resurrection, I believe we are not going to be restarting businesses. We are going to be starting businesses because in effect, we have human mindsets that have changed and we're also entering a new world of technology. And I remind people that in 2009, 2010, after General Motors and Ford came out of the Great Recession, they went back to thinking they were restarting the business. But people's mindsets had changed and companies like Tesla and Uber had been launched, and they missed that completely, right? Gillette and Schick completely missed the whole world of YouTube and social media and Dollar Shave Club. So similarly, right now, when we're in the world of AI, 5G, voice, and cloud, and a completely new, worldwide new mindset, do you actually know who your competitors are anymore? Do you actually know who your consumers are? Do you even know which category you're competing in? So my belief is you should think about starting a business with all the assets your company has and only 3 constraints. Whatever you do has to be legal, which is number one. Number two is whatever you do has to be technologically possible in 2021. And number three, you have to make money in 3 years or less or break even. So there's a financial perspective. And when you do that, you're going to create amazing new things. So that's the way I basically combined it. So I started from a human perspective and brought it down to a business perspective. But I've used words that can work for a human and for a business. Resilience, supply chain resilience, personal resilience, resurrection, company, personal, fragility. Balance sheet is fragile. I'm fragile.
I'm getting goosebumps. This is, you've always been a master of narrative, but this, sometimes, champions are really born in times of need, and your voice has been one of incredible leadership since the dawn of COVID-19. Personally, I mean, I've followed your work for many, many years, but I'm a real big fan of your thinking. I'm a real big fan of humanization. In some of my research, I've found just in the last 90 days alone, you can, using data, I call it data-driven empathy, so that you can force yourself to humanize the data that you're gathering, to see how people have changed, not just from a behavior set, but also from what they're feeling, the anxiety, the confusion, the anger and frustration. And these are all things that come together to form the need for new engagement, new experiences, even new brands and new businesses.
Absolutely. And one of the reasons why I think a lot of people find my book interesting is I show how that's done. So in the chapter called Too Much Math, Too Little Meaning, right? I reveal the fact that I have an advanced degree in mathematics. So people find that like confusing, which is I'm talking about human. I said, I know so much about math. I'm telling you, be careful. Remember that algorithms, right? As someone basically said, are weapons of math destruction, right? And that an algorithm is nothing but an opinion embedded in code. So let's be careful about what we're talking about. But as importantly, I show how you go from math to meaning through a process which I call the 6 I's, which includes integrate, involve, be inclusive. And so those are the important things, which is I truly believe that every person has amazing potential, that every individual is themselves a leader, right? If nothing else, you can lead yourself. But in order to do that, you need to start growing yourself. And so I end by basically saying, make sure you spend an hour a day learning new things. and always build a case for the exact opposite of what you believe. Because if you can't build the opposite case, you don't understand the world.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, I think this calls for a wholesale reinvention of how leaders are cultivated. You know, we have a lot of people who purport to be in the leadership development area. There's the mountain of books and checklists and training regimes on leadership. And I think most of them fall short in terms of this humanistic, this blended approach that you're describing. And the idea that there would be a new definitive 21st century regime for leadership cultivation is, I think, still a promissory note. So these are very important indicators of what we should expect from those kinds of learning experiences.
They are, and I'm now working with a lot of different companies because they're beginning to realize that, especially in this COVID-19 world, I basically say, hey, look, people are feeling isolated at home. How do they connect? How do they grow? Right? So a lot of when I do talks, I do only 20 minutes of talk and then 40 minutes of Q&A. And I try to interact a whole bunch because people feel at least connected versus who the hell is this and what's going on. But as importantly is I've now identified 4 areas and I'm asking companies to focus on these 4 areas. That's what I actually sort of teach online. One is simply that change sucks because it's really difficult, right? And how do you make change not suck? And that is basically tell me why it's good for me, incent me to change, and provide me with training. They don't do that. They just say change is good. That doesn't
forget
work.
about it.
Right. So, change sucks is one. One is then how to lead with soul, which I talked a little bit about, the 5 characteristics of leaders. The third one is how to basically upgrade your mental operating system. That's and also emotional operating system, which I write about in my, and as importantly is how to have a unified worldview of the future. What people have forgotten is reading a lot of trend reports and bringing in a lot of consultants doesn't give you a worldview that you can actually operate with. Right. It gives you a bunch of facts and charts, right? How do you actually integrate so you can operate? And I'm starting to teach that too.
Well, you have to own it. You have to internalize it. It has to be organic. It has to be something you can believe in. It's not an intellectual exercise. It's not a spreadsheet. And no. To use your metaphor, it's a story.
It is. And in the end, this eventually turns out to be all about people because, however much we might not like people, right? Like I sometimes tell people, everything is easy, but people get in the way. We know that's true in business, right? Everything's easy, but people get in the way. But without people, besides us being dead, the world would not be interesting. So actually, business is about inspiring, teaching, and growing people.
I'm just noticing that Leslie is I'm impressed that she's able to keep up with all of these incredible ideas, Rishad, that you're sharing. Well, thank you. I have to just say thank you from the bottom of my heart. It has been incredible. We could talk to you probably all day, every day, but it's been very inspiring to just hear you today, but also just listen to you since that book came out. And I wish you the best on your next stage of awesome, Rishad. I look forward to catching up with you personally as well.
Thank you again, Brian and John. And
great to meet you. Yeah.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Wow. Okay. I feel like I need to take a breath. That's incredible. Leslie, hopefully you're doing all right over there. I got caught up in just marveling over how you're able to keep up with everything. So our next guest is, I got to tell you, this is from a true geek, but also just rock star perspective. This person is truly inspiring. Let's just bring him on, and we'll jump right into it. Brian Roemmele, hey man, I was totally expecting you to come on with some sunglasses and a Rickenbacker.
Yeah, where's the guitar?
But you're like perfect for the jam session. Oh, there we go. Oh, there we go. That's
1995.
That's our next broadcast medium too. Is we'll have to come to you not just live, but in virtual and augmented reality. Hey, so before we throw it to you, Brian, let me just kind of set the stage for you. he's a recognized world authority on how voice AI will impact computing and commerce. He's a champion for voice first design. He said that every single brand and business will be impacted by the voice first revolution. He is an advisor, a speaker, a writer, a musician. He is a prolific Twitter composer and curator. I could go on and on. He's also a rock star. I'm a big fan of his. Brian, welcome to Intersections.
Thank you, John and Brian. I really appreciate it. And I was looking around who you're going to introduce here, but such an honor. A big fan of both your guys' work. So yeah, lots to talk about. So direct me. What do you want to talk about?
Man, you know, I was doing some research coming into this to see like what was your narrative these days, and it is all over the place. But I got to tell you that these are exciting times, right? Because we're starting to see the things that you have long predicted, you have long championed, that you've long said was going to happen, starting to happen. So maybe we could start with a bit about your work and your focus, and then maybe kind of go into, like, for example, the fact that you can use Alexa at a gas station to pay for gas, you know, and where we're going.
Great. Well, thank you. I started getting involved in voice as an interface, most frustratingly, growing up in New Jersey around Bell Laboratories before the divestiture. And so I was around Princeton area and the 70s and 80s. And it was a golden era. And the dreams and ambitions of some of the research scientists I got to know, because I had friends whose parents worked at these institutions, Princeton, Institute of Advanced Study, David Sarnoff Research Center, and Princeton University, Bell Laboratories. So Institute of Advanced Study, David Sarnoff Research Center. Oh, I'm hearing an echo. I'm sorry. That's weird. All right, so I'll ignore that. Bell Laboratories. So basically what I started to do is I started to realize that the interface of a computer was a legacy interface, even in the 70s and 80s. And it existed primarily because a computer couldn't understand what our intentions are and, you know, to be able to act upon those intentions, work to be done. So we took an 1870s interface, developed so you can type typewriter very quickly. So that's a real reason why typewriter was invented. The QWERTY keyboard was so that salespeople could type typewriter really quickly. So here we are in 2020, and we're still communicating to the computer on the computer's level and not on the human level. So I realized that the technology wasn't there yet in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. So I studied. I wrote a major manifesto. I hate using the word manifesto these days, but that's what I called it back in that era, late 70s and to the mid 80s. And I started assembling, oh gosh, it was 900 pages. And that wasn't even the work product. And it was just basically mapping out and wargaming what the future would look like from the future coming backwards. So I picked a point into the future. This is my secret, how I can predict how things are going to be. And I understand how gravity works. There's gravity in human nature. And I said, okay, we're not going to be typing on keyboards forever. We're not going to be gesticulating in the air forever. Our intents are going to be assumed based on our context. So I started really studying what I call the human OS, or the human operating system. Yes. And it made me at odds with everybody in the computer industry and just about everybody in AI, because when you start studying the human OS, you start really studying our goals, our ambitions, and our desires. What is the work that we're trying to get done at any given moment on a computer? And it's a fascinating study of over 30 years of mine to just follow along with people. I've done hundreds of studies. What are you really doing? And you can break it down into about 3 equal parts. There's a lot more to it, but I'll simplify it. There's serendipity. We all love serendipity. And this is things that come to us without our expectation. Now, there's what I call metered serendipity. And that serendipity comes from us because of the world that we inhabit, the people we follow, the news feeds that we have, things like that. That's a metered serendipity. It's not really a random serendipity. Unfortunately, and we're learning the byproduct of that right now in our era, in this epoch, of what metered serendipity will cause, especially when it's, let's call it weaponized for advertising purposes. All right, so then we have true work to get done. You need to find out something. But it turns out humans aren't really in search of facts. They're searching in feelings. They're trying to get a feel. What's the population like in China right at this moment? Do you need it to the last decimal point? Nobody does. So what you do is you consult Wikipedia. How old is that? Who knows? Nobody really knows. So we think we're searching for a fact. I got it on Wikipedia, I got a fact. No, you didn't. You got an assumption. And when you finally get to the idea that we really don't ever deal with facts, we're dealing with relativities, then you start realizing what AI can really do. Computers are trying to generate facts as hard as it can. And the human is trying to discern all of the junk that data and information gives us to try to create a pyramid of wisdom. I started building this pyramid back in the 70s. People thought it was crazy. So the very first strata is data. The next strata is information. The next strata is insight. The next strata is knowledge. And the top strata is wisdom. What computers are doing right now is drowning us in data and information. But we are starving for wisdom. Absolutely starving for wisdom. And so when you approach it from that point of view, if in fact human intelligence is what we want to amplify, because I don't even know what machine intelligence looks like. Is speed AI? Just because something is faster, does it impart artificial intelligence? I say no. I say it's ridiculous. I say being fast does afford a lot of positivity. It does cause a lot of things, but is it in fact intelligence? No. And Brian, you pointed out in my Twitter feed, a lot of people say, you post some random things. What are these animal videos about? Well, what I'm trying to do is prepare people for understanding that there are other forms of intelligence. Like I had an African gray parrot that was able to open up a number of latches. And what I try to demonstrate with that is you have a form of intelligence there that didn't require 100 million latch pictures to be learned by rote learning of AI. So right there tells you that the systemologies that are being used by artificial intelligence community at this point is going to work, but it's not really human-like intelligence, and it really isn't intelligence. It's rote pattern matching. It's just trying to find this pattern, and that's certainly not how you and I discovered what bird-like looks like. We only maybe had to see approximately 20 birds in our early existence, and then we knew what bird-like was. I call that a protocol. So why am I saying all this? The reason why I have this idea of voice first is not voice only, and a lot of people hear voice only. It has nothing to do with only. It means that the primary interface is a human interface, which is the voice. And why is it a voice? If I give you something to read, you're going to hear a voice in your head. It's going to be your inner monologue. It's your narrative. And there are people who are told medically that they have no inner dialogue. And that's absolutely absurd. I can show you with brain scans that there is an inner dialogue. You can't read unless there's something reading it to you in your head. So our input mechanism is in fact a voice. And our encoding mechanism for a lot of the information that we take in is in fact a voice. Why? Because we're reading it. And then when we see a picture, we're trying to decode that picture with an indexing system, which will say something like bird-like. So we'll see what a bird is, and then we'll create a mnemonic for a bird, which is indexed by a word or a sound of that word in our mind. We don't see the text. So how absurd is it that we're typing one letter at a time to communicate amongst each other, and then we start wondering, why do we have a communication breakdown in society? Because we moved away from our primary interface, which, by the way, let's say a few million years has designed, right? So it's beta tested for a few million years. It's called our voice. And then we dumbed ourselves down, not just for, 10 fingers, but for thumbs, thumb clawing on a glass screen. And then we're saying we're a lot more advanced. And no, what we did is we simplified the data input because of the size factor of the input device. It did nothing to help humans. It helped the computer. Now, if I can get 100% of your context at any given time, give me 6 months with anybody, and I can predict to the 90th percentile what you're going to look at before you wake up and present it to you as a conversation in the morning, 10 minutes. For the average person, maybe 15 minutes. And if you want to see the cat pictures of your favorite friends, you could say, yes, upvote that cat picture. Great, move on. What have I done? I've taken what you would normally do, derived from your context, and then I add something called my serendipity engine. The serendipity engine is a truly random engine based on a whole lot of secret sauces. And it literally reaches out into the world and it gives you stuff that you see in my Twitter feed, stuff that is tangentially related to a theme that you're on at that given moment, maybe a couple of themes. At any given moment, I unfortunately have a lot of themes I'm on. So it does get random, but the average person might have 20 themes that are reoccurring through their, let's call localized life, a space of a 10-day period. And so the serendipity engine can start feeding that. But it also reaches out into the randomness of the world and gives you viewpoints and insights that you would be otherwise diametrically opposed to. It's vitally important to hear that, because the public commons used to drive us through areas where we could hear in a coffee shop and in a park somebody just barking out something that otherwise we might be against. But hold it. There's a kernel of something this person is saying that resonates with me. We don't do that anymore because we have 240 characters. We have to say it. We have to categorize it. We have to pattern match it. And we have to categorize it and move it along because we have information overload. That information is data and information that's flooding us, drowning us. Because at the top of the pyramid, there's no wisdom.
Right. And
we can't advocate the wisdom to an algorithm in a cloud. One of the problems that makes me very controversial is and I'm not doing this on purpose, is if I'm going to give you 100% of my context, I'm not going to put it in a cloud. It's got to be hyper local. So this automatically makes me unhireable in every tech company because everybody, and I'm not putting anybody down, prior guests and future guests, people's jobs, sorry. But I'm just being realistic. If you're going to give 100% of context to AI and you imagine that's going to be in a cloud somewhere and everything's going to be fine and it's not going to bear witness against you at some point, I think you're living in fantasy world, and I'm sorry, but that's the reality of it once you thought process this. But if you want this world, if you want a world where you're liberated, no longer glass, thumb clawing at a glass screen, but lifted up and looking around the world. I do most of my writing walking around in nature, right? I just transcribe it into something I call the intelligence amplifier. Why do I do that? Because it's kind of funny because I take AI and I twist it around to IA because I really believe in human intelligence amplification. The other thing I do is I design these systems to match my Myers-Briggs. And I say Myers-Briggs because everybody can probably understand that, but I don't really use Myers-Briggs. I use Jungian archetypes. And a Jungian archetype of a human being might want verbosity, right? I'm the kind of guy that I like verbosity, obviously, right? I'm monologuing here. But other people want anti-verbosity, right? So if I match the AI assistant, and I'm going to use the word AI, but again, I don't really believe in artificial general intelligence, nor do we ever need it. And I believe that's chasing idols across the desert. I think it becomes a problem for academia. The problem is, I go to academia and they always wind up grinding to this vanishing point of artificial general intelligence. It's not going to happen until we get artificial general intelligence, as if it's some kind of revelation into the future. I will tell you, we could be here 500 years from now and they'd be saying the same thing. It's unachievable because it's the wrong goal. The goal is a job to get done. It's a Clayton Christensen modern incarnation. Every human being that's doing anything has a tool, because humans are tool makers. We survive by making tools. In fact, we're born naked. If we didn't create some form of tools, we wouldn't be here. I mean, to be frank about it. So we build a tool to get a job done. The problem is a computer doesn't understand the job that we need to get done, and it insults us with 10 million organized Google responses, and we're now in the modern era. Well, I got a search engine, I can find everything. So there you are, drowning in data, right? So now what? You have to sort that data. So what is half your day? Turns out half of anybody's day, and statistically I'm talking about a few thousand people I've studied, is drifting through data, drowning in it. Right. Okay, I need Wikipedia source. Okay, is this person valid? Let me check Snoops and let me go here. And you go in, and that's where we are today. So we are literally in a quagmire of too much data. And then there is data scientists like myself, I come from this world too, that say, I know what I'll do is I'll make a chart and a graph. That'll simplify it. Most people don't care about charts and graphs. You throw a chart and graph in front of most people, as long as the line goes up or down, that's just about all they're looking at. So charts and graphs are not very meaningful, but relativity is meaningful. How big is this compared to that? Humans are a relativity matching system, and we also do use pattern matching, but I like informed pattern matching. So that's the intelligence amplifier. The intelligence amplifier is based, and it's not a future product. It's something I built in my garage. I do it with current technology. There's no new designs that need to come about. There doesn't need to be a university study and a bunch of AI engineers. I slapped it together with a bunch of junk. You know, I'm not so good at coding. I'm not so good at soldering. It's a bunch of Raspberry Pis. It's about 300 now. Don't tell my wife. And they're meshed. They're on a local mesh network. And the only thing goes out to the internet are agents. And agents exist for sometimes microseconds. They go out, find a piece of information, and disappear, pass that information under the door, and that's it. So the device is never connected to the internet directly. Why is that important? For 1,000 reasons, but I think today it might be confidence, security, things of that nature. It also follows me around everywhere I go. Everything I've read, everything I've heard. This conversation is being, seen by that. Most conversations aren't, because we don't have the social contract that allows me to record conversations, because we still feel, even with Apple glasses coming out soon, we still feel that it could be used against us. Even though when we're in public, we're being recorded all the time. They have our data.
That's true.
Google has our data. Facebook has our data. They're recording everything we're doing. I'm not being paranoid that, they're looking at me through the camera. Maybe, no. But I'm saying
the Chinese government.
Yeah, Chinese government.
And microchipping later.
They're microchipping in the, so what I'm saying is, isn't it about time we own our own context? Isn't it about time that we reverse it and say, okay, advertiser, if you want my context, I'll sell you a small piece of my context, and you can pay for it through this new mechanism. And so you get to maybe communicate with me about your new energy beverage or your new organic tea. And all of a sudden, you now are self-empowered. Now, I'm not going to say this is a possibility. This is where it's going, one way or another. So it's going to dismediate the mediators. And currently, everybody thinks, well, we're still in the tech world. Google's a tech company, a mediator. No, they're an old company. I'm not putting anybody on, but Google, the great company. Don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. But they are a mediator between you and your context. So why don't you sell your context directly? And so once you start owning your context, you can market your context. And frankly, you can become wealthy from it, because you are a knowledge amplifier also. So as you start carousing knowledge and information, you can sell your path through that knowledge and information as what we might call a modern book, or even a modern video. I have two video cameras on me right now, one here and one on my intelligence amplifier. It's not this guy over here. He's old. So once you start getting that data, why do I have video and audio? I don't ever want to look at it. By the way, most of you guys are never going to see your pictures that you've taken, right? We take pictures. No other human being will ever lay eyes on it. I'm not saying all of them, but most of them. And then what happens to them when you die? We're all going to die. Where do they go? Who's going to pay for it? Because at some point, somebody's going to come knocking at the door and say, hey, great-great-great-grandpa's pictures, you know, the 945,000 of them of everything great-great-grandpa ever ate. Somebody's going to have to pay for that storage, or it's got to go somewhere. So part of the intelligence amplifier is also about what I call your wisdom keeper. Now, this is very important. So let's go on. I'll let you kind of put a cap on this. Imagine the moment we're born to the moment we pass on. There's a camera. And then again, be creative about it, because it's not going to be a camera on your shoulder. And it's not going to be eyeglasses. Let's just say a device that records everything that's ever been around you. Every book, every movie, everything you've ever had context with. And it draws connections, what I call neuronal connections, for the rest of your life. At some point, you're going to leave this plane, right? At the moment, you're no longer biologically connected to this system, and it's not going to be an implant. Sorry, it's not a neural link. It doesn't need to be that way. The moment you pass on, it becomes your wisdom keeper. It literally is a sum total of everything you've ever experienced. It's the essence of your experiences. It will not be you. It's not her. It's not an android you're falling in love with. And it's not a form of the singularity where it's going to live on and it's going to be a super brain. I try to ground myself into reality and not science fiction or science fantasy. Some people can have their way with that and say, well, it's going to be this. Everything I'm saying today is stuff we can do right now. So what it can do is it can be a narrative, a dialogue. It can be Brian and John 300 years from now and saying, hey, Brian, you wrote that amazing book. How did you do it? What was your thought process back there in 2018? You know, I remember that book you put out. And they're like, tell me. And you can say, well, you know, it was a really weird time in my life. And I remember these are the different things that helped me put that book together. So not only do you have the work product of your book, you have the thought process of Brian when he put that book together. And you have a conversation. How amazing would it be if you and I, all of us, could have a conversation with Albert Einstein or Stephen Hawking now, or anybody? Now, it wouldn't be them, but it would be their experiences. This can come about through the intelligence amplifier. Intelligence amplifier serves you while you're alive, and it becomes a proxy, perhaps, for you when you leave. And perhaps all those proxies interconnect, and they become what is called a noosphere, a connection of all the wisdom that humanity has assembled. First person wisdom, not Wikipedia, not prose that we put 2 lines on a paper, but wisdom that we've achieved. Now with edits, hopefully not our bathroom visits and other things that are embarrassing or whatever, but the stuff we want to share. And thousands of years of that, hundreds and thousands of years. What would the world look like? So what I'm saying is it's going to go in that direction, because that's the nature of what humans have been building. Those are the tools that we've been making as you look at the arc of history. Do you want to start building it now? Or do we still want to thumb claw on glass screens and get excited over a new radius on a corner or the possibility of just doing something cool? I mean, it's fun. I'm excited for the next iPhone. I'm excited for the next upgrade to what Amazon's doing. I don't want to say her name because there will be a few that will pop up here. And I'm excited for what Apple's doing with Siri and Google. But I've lived in that world already. So anyway, that's sort of my short-term thesis on this. There's a lot more delicateness to the idea, but I try to present it as quickly and as simply as I can, and I think that's the best way I can do it. Does it make sense? Man,
it sure does. In fact, I think we could just put up a banner right under you that says, well, thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
I'm not ready for TED. Kick me out. Where's that round dot?
No. Oh man, it just brings a whole new life to the human operating system and the concept of transcendence. That this is really real. And I think what we're going to have to do, Brian, is if you're up for it, bring you back on because I have a whole bunch of questions that we didn't even get to. So we have to
anytime.
So we got to do that. John, is there anything that you want to throw in there?
I have a lot of questions as well. And even though, Brian says that he's not drawing from science fiction or science fantasy. I mean, these are memes that have been around for a while that, I've been excited about since childhood.
Oh, yeah. And I stand on shoulders. These are not my ideas.
Of course. And, the whole idea, I'm sensing a theme between our two speakers thus far, which is this whole need to balance the technological in the sense of the spreadsheet and the humanistic in the sense of what brings the whole, the soul, if you will. And I couldn't be more excited actually about Brian's work, because I think that it's taking the strengths of technology and using them to create what we all need, which is more human-centered proficiencies leading up to hopefully the aspiration to wisdom, and also the ability to preserve that wisdom in a way that makes it accessible, which only technology could offer. So there's a conversation between the two. And then I guess my final reflection is that I've loved voice since the dawn of voice. I mean, I like to animate my world with voice to the best of my ability. With the technologies that are currently available. And, the thing about voice is that it enables conversation, right? So in our intersections environment here, we're conversing. And this conversation is exactly like the process that jazz musicians go through when they're on stage. Bill Evans said that when he played solo, it was conversations with himself.
Yeah,
and he wasn't passing a memo with the chord changes from one hemisphere of his brain to the other. He was having a conversation. So, I think that whereas being trapped in words and images on a screen can be a certain kind of transmission, conversation is really where new things can more easily emerge. I mean, that's what happens on stage with, Brian, the sax player, and John, the piano player. We have a conversation. We start with something we know, and the music sounds good when we get to a place that's unfamiliar, but still obeys a certain form. Because unless you have a form, it's just going to be random notes or the sound of dogs barking, and not very meaningful. Nobody's going to really want to sit still to listen to it. So I think voice enables a level of creativity that we all want. And if you combine voice with, one of our speakers last week was talking about how when we have universal translation that's automated, the barriers between humans who speak different languages, come from different social and cultural environments, will break down, which enlarges this sort of gene pool, if you will, for creative ideation. And so it's like having all of a sudden tons of new musicians that are able to play different kinds of scales and, traffic in different kinds of harmonies. And so the language of creativity, in this limited musical analogy, but in a more broad sense, gets enlarged. And then if you platform that on top of machine intelligence in the way that you've been talking, or machine-based intelligence in the way that you've been talking about it, so that it amplifies the assets that only humans can create, you have something really profound, I think. So I'm very excited by what you've been saying.
Yeah, John, I got to say one thing about the music element. Albert Einstein is very famous in saying that general relativity and relativity, special relativity, was a music inspired theory. If he was not playing the piano and violin, he would not have been able to reach beyond this, because humans are always reaching slightly beyond the factual. That's where we're our best. Anywhere in corporations, this is my big problem with HR, is that they're always looking for a perfect fit. You don't want a perfect fit. You want people that are reaching out and contorting an organization to be creative. And the problem is, I sit with startups, I sit with legacy companies, and they always fall back to Let's make the box. Here's your definition. And that's why every company winds up reaching an atrophy level. Every company, it doesn't matter, because ultimately the creativity process that the founders have had is gone. And that creativity process is a musical process. It's a creative process. And it comes about like this. It comes about through dialogue and excited interactions, not meetings. Meetings have an agenda. Conversations don't necessarily have an agenda. I don't think this had an agenda, right? We just kind of talk, right?
It's like what we're doing. Right here.
The whole foundation of the show.
Yeah.
So, Brian, over to you to curate. Are we gonna?
Yeah, let's bring Rika on for a few moments to kind of preview what our conversation is going to be about. But before we do that, Brian, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I love being here. I love you guys. Really appreciate it.
Look forward to the next time, and thank you so much. And also, before I forget, Leslie, let's make sure that if you can go back and capture that pyramid, that would be an incredible add to the visual. So, John, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, so we are improvising, and sometimes the music is very succinct, and sometimes it goes on. And so we want to give our next guest, Rika Nakazawa, the full measure of time. So this is like the, how can I put this? This is like the appetizer course for a main course that will be featuring Rika in a forthcoming show, possibly the next show. I've known Rika through a process that I've been running called Reimagining American Innovation, which has brought together a bunch of domain experts. And Rika is so interesting because, you know, if multifaceted is a theme of the show, she is that squared. So multicultural, multi-geographical, multi-skill set, Silicon Valley insider, whose theme these days is really tracking, in a sense, with this balance between the spreadsheet and the story, and between the data and the humanism. Because I think one of her many advocacies, and I'm so impressed by how she takes her talents and devotes them to cause-related social agendas, is how to create high-performing boards of directors that actually can express stewardship in a way that's strengthened by diversity. So with that, Rika, the floor is yours for however long you can stay with us, and then we'll be sure to see you again soon.
Okay. No, thank you, John. Good to see you again. And Brian, so great to meet you. So since I grew up in Japan, I would call it not an appetizer, but perhaps one course of a kaiseki meal that will way forward when I come back on. But just to spend a couple minutes, and I will tie back to the other two gentlemen, simply because, number one, I went to Princeton, so was hearing about Albert Einstein all the time, and so that's definitely something to weave in. But even around, you know, the soul in business, this all ties back together around diversity, right? Diversity has been a term that has been ongoing, diversity in the workforce, diversity, et cetera. And one of the things that I'd love to talk about when we come back together and have more time is to really talk about sort of the way to get to this collective wisdom, the way to have a multifarious conversation that's enriching and inspiring, and the way to be able to have people that communicate in a way that's not unqwerty, but also to have that full, rich experience, really is about having that diverse representation and being able to bring together all those voices. And it's also really trying to figure out how to walk that fine balance of embracing a multitude of different backgrounds, ethnicities, gender identities, and all these different things in a way that is harmonious and is orchestrated, right? Because it can be easy for it to become quite cacophonous. But as it relates to boards, and what I'll talk about is just, and this is a hot topic, right, is the impact of coronavirus. In our modern time, this has been the biggest disruptor. And so even going back to the comments that were made earlier about empathy and how the coronavirus has catapulted us into having this very concentrated period of this digital paradigm being the new way that we cultivate social capital, which is the biggest factor that we're focused on around board diversity. How do we do that, right? How do we, in this era where we can't actually have those moments of giving hugs or being present in a room, how do we do that? And so there's a lot of focus on boards, and boards are focusing a lot on ESG. You know, for those of you in San Francisco, yesterday you saw how the skies were Mars-like, right? It was orange. And so this idea of thinking about the fabric of how we are, almost the World Wide Web of people, not just the digital components, like how do you reconcile all this? And so boards are thinking about high performance, because boards are being relied on now more than ever to navigate through this unprecedented time of crisis, as well as thinking about empathy, because what the pandemic has done is that it's really shown the light on the workforce, right? Pandemic is about death and health. And so the idea of being able to think about the workforce and think about that and have empathy, and chances are on the gender balance scale of diversity, a gender balanced boardroom is probably going to be able to have amplified empathy than not. Sure. And so there's a lot of different things that I'd love to unpack. You know, the whole human machine interface has been a hallmark of my career, which we'll talk a little about as well. But what I am really excited to share with the listeners of the show, and also to have that dialogue afterwards, hopefully, is to have that conversation of how to navigate that as we move forward. So look forward to talking to you more about that. And thank you again for the opportunity to.
Well, we're so lucky in a way because we get you twice now. So thank you very much for that.
Yes, Rika, I'm looking so forward to it. I had an opportunity to do some work with Barbara Ennis of Gender Intelligence, and also Jason Corman of Gaping Void, where we were looking at making this conversation less of a training or a checklist, and more of a real human plus algorithmic approach to change the way we think and the change we work. So I am personally excited to welcome you back. So John, let's coordinate it and let's make it happen sooner than later.
Yep,
Rika,
absolutely.
thank you so much. I'm so excited. It's a pleasure to at least see you virtually, and I look forward to meeting you in the real world as well.
Thank you. Likewise. Take care.
All right, you too. John, all right. Well, another action-packed episode. I don't even know where to go. I still have like more questions that I want to get out for Rishad, for Brian, and I do want to spend time with Rika.
And we don't plan this really in the sense of sitting down and designing the theme of the session, but this notion of this creative tension between the technological and the human resounds in all three of the deep dives or the mini dives that we've done today. So there's a lot to be mined there for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I also want to say that one of our viewers and commenters today is also the talent behind a lot of the creative that you see out in social media. Kira Dazi here, who is featured. She's also an incredibly smart individual, and I've known her for, gosh, better part of maybe somewhere between 10 and 15 years. Gregarious, our producer and also serial entrepreneur and founder, I was also friends with her. Go back to the days of the Web 2.0 LA startup scene. So with that, John, I totally agree. This was an incredible jam session. I want to jam some more. I cannot wait till next week. Thank you, everybody, for watching. John, if you want to say some parting words before we go into our outro.
Well, so Leslie's artwork is going to be posted in a couple of locations. There's a Flickr stream and there's also Instagram. And, she's like a visual flight recorder for the concepts that are raised in the show. And it's often nice once you've heard the speakers to go back and take a look at her work. So, we want to take the material that we're generating and repurpose it and make it available to all of you out there. And that's where Leslie comes in. She's our secret weapon.
She sure is, and an incredible talent and just wonderful human being. And Leslie and I will be broadcasting to you next week, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, from Lake Tahoe. So we'll be at different parts of the lake, which is very cool. And Leslie, maybe we can get together for a glass of wine. We'll be socially distant and COVID friendly. On that note, hey John, what's our Instagram URL?
I think it's Instagram. And then the destination is Intersections Live, which is also our website designation.
That's right. We're going to be launching a website. In the meantime, we have this newsletter that we're going to be launching shortly as well. And we look forward to seeing you online. Thank you, John. It's always amazing, Brian, to be here with you. So good. I am I'm ready to take on the world. I am so motivated. Hey, Gregarious, let's take us out with our John-fueled piano playing outro.